To pay tribute to the men who made the film, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. And I'll play my song Roger and Bob wrote out that day. And then we have the honor of having Al Hodgson join us today. And he will have a few words to address to this gathering, this great celebration of the 40th anniversary. And again, I want to thank everyone for coming and everyone who helped make this event possible. And I do have a message from Bob Gimlin for the gathering, and I'll pass that along a little later during the testimonials we'll have. But after Al, we'll have then David Murphy speak about the life of Roger Patterson. So, looks like we're ready, and just a second. This is called Roger and Bob wrote out that day. It really is. Doing my own sound. Okay, ready? Roger and Bob rode out that day till that log jam got in their way. That day, how they got lucky when she walked away. Yeah, Roger and Bob rode out that day. Roger and Bob were gone a week, right in the forest around Bluff Creek. Shot some film of a Bigfoot there. On two legs and was covered in hair. Roger and Bob had quite a week. Al got a call on the telephone. Roger and Bob stopped by his phone. They told him about their good luck. Roger said, I filmed that son of a buck. Yeah, Al got a call on the telephone. John and Renee came down to see just what those guys saw on Bluff Creek. They made maps of the site complete, made Jim McLaren walk in Patty's feet. Yeah, John and Renee came down to see Bob Tidman's. He came out to cast those tracks left by Patty first to last. Well, they showed movement of a flexible foot. They weren't perfect, but were worth a look. Yeah, Bob Tidman's came out to cast. Thank you very much. Always get a little goose pimply when I play that. I'll tell you who else it makes cry, but we're really honored today at this gathering to have with us someone who was around during the time of all the activity here, and to this day continues to help and support those of us who come back to this area. And it's always a pleasure to stay in touch with him. Again, I'm just very pleased to be with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Al Hodgson.
Folks, thank you very much. I am honored, by the way, and incidentally, I love your song.
Thank you.
Today, last night I picked this up here at the Cinnabar Sand. They have them around town. Funny story about Arcata. Judy Hodgson, not no relation, but they've got an article in there about Bigfoot and this incident of gathering here today. In there, I don't like it. But anyway, I want to say something. I just wanted to tell you that it is there. You get on the stands, around is free. I think it's, in my opinion, poor. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm talking that way. A few things I can say here about some of the people that I've known. You know, I was very fortunate that I knew John Green and Renee Hendon and right on down the line, you know, and way back even to Betty Allen. And I would just like to say a few things about how common these are. Sightings are much more common than what most people think. I got a partial list of some of the people I know that have claimed to see them. I have to say claim because I can't prove it. They truly are. But I don't, some that I don't truly don't believe did see it. I don't say a word. That's the go with that. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to say too, I met a man from the Navajo, tribe of the Navajos here a while back over Labor Day weekend. And he was telling me that he's doing some work, he's up here working with the Yurok. And he said that the Navajos have in their traditions, in their lore, about a beast that they called, I believe he said, Yiki. But it was so near to Yeti that he couldn't help but wonder if some connection somewhere. It's amazing, I don't know. But anyway, another man is, that I know of, trying to check it out further, so maybe we'll know more later. But interesting fact that the name is so similar. Okay. Anyway, some of the things I wanted to say. Oh, by the way, during the symposium here 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Anyway, a lot of you that was here, you don't know how close you came to some things that you didn't even know. I mean, it was significant, in my opinion, that you walked right by and didn't see it. I was up there a couple of weeks before. I didn't go up on the trip. I was too tired to go. When we got to that, I went up there before opening the road, getting everything ready to go. We went around taking cutting a pathway so you have a place to go around. We found a place where there was scat, where it was quite something, whatever it was, had went to the same place, renewed themselves time after time, but what didn't work. Now, I backed off from it because my partner there with me that day said, well, it looked like a beast of burden to me. And it didn't look that way. It was almost like biscuits, like a horse, only it was still together. But I got to think about it later on. There were no horse tracks, no mule tracks, no donkey tracks. no nothing around there with any indication of that at all. I don't know what it could be. It's not an elk. There's elk in that country, but I don't know what, it's not, definitely not a bear. But anyway, to me, this probably was significant, except and dumb me, I didn't tell anybody else about it. And all the rest of you guys walk right on by it. I shouldn't put it that way, but it's true.
True.
I was going to say about around here, there's an awful lot of sightings around here. And I truly believe that they can be almost any place where there's cover for them. And sometimes, some of the cases I've heard, really not any cover. I've heard of what cases over around Reno, out that way, where it's really open country. I don't know how on earth, what they ate or how they survived out there. And that be seen too. But there was the first thing I know of, or hear this, I wasn't there, I didn't see it, didn't talk to the doctor, but the doctor I knew in the 30s that saw one out nearly to Arcata there, where the scales are today. Only it was on the old road in there was pretty crooked and around it. While he was had an emergency going into town, and just want to run across the road and fire it. The next one that I know of was across the river here, about a mile from here. And this lady told me after I had that first cast that you showed on the screen a while ago online, I had that on the counter. And she came in and she said, you know, that's what was over at our place 10 years ago. And she told me how it was, that time Patterson Road was a dirty, dusty road, it wasn't paved. And they found tracks all summer long on the road. Well, later that summer they found where they even slept in their barn, and the horses went wild for the time, and then one of the girls saw it. And what it was, who knows? But anyway, they found this man that they saw back in the tracks. They found him later. He was just a little bitty man with little bitty feet. But anyway, the tracks were there. But then we went. There was a lot of things here because of the stigma of it being a hoax, or just being something in your imagination. Everybody's saying, "Well, you got a bridge to sell you too." But,
Yeah.
Pardon? But yeah. Well, I've been told the same thing. Anyway, around here, we've had a lot of sightings, and I'll just name a few. I'll just call the name of Rose, a lady that I know very well. She saw one, and her son was riding a motorbike, and they had a hunting cabin down below Wichita, and up on the hill, and her son came up the hill on his dirt bike, and she seen something behind him, and he got up closer. It was a Bigfoot chasing him. And so he got up there, and she said, well, in fact, they followed him up, and she said it and her was standing right there and staring at each other for a time. And she can tell you exactly what it was like. And her son, she asked her son, weren't you scared? He said, scared of what? He didn't have any idea. But then I was telling John Green about this, and John said, well, he says, you know, that's not the first time. They knew one chasing a man on a bike, on a pedal bike. But obviously he could have caught him, he was just playing. And they thought this was the case here, he was just playing, chasing the guy. And then Shirley was a lady I knew that saw one. Her son-in-law had been burned very bad. She was ready to the burn center to see him, and her daughter, the boy's wife, was driving the car, and she was sitting on the passenger side. And some of you know where Pigeon Point is up toward Weaverville. Well, they said, don't run into there. She looked over the bank, and here's a Bigfoot just over the bank over there. She got a good look at it. But she said, now, you know, she said it was only about 5 foot tall. And that's, well, After all, there has to be juveniles unless it's a hoax. And so she said, oh no, they were too saggy. Pardon me, ladies, they're female. But anyway, very definitely. And then the first lady I talked about, I forgot to tell you the color. She said, the color was like a color, but a golden retriever. So there are apparently a lot of different colors of it. And a few years ago, I don't know if any of you have seen the National Geographic videos they had on that. Probably some of you have. Well, anyway, I advertised for people who had something to come forward and tell their story at the National Geographic. So I had this call from a lady from Salt Bar. And so I returned her call, and I said, well, where did you see it? She said 4 miles west of Willow Creek. How did you see that? She said, well, I drive a produce truck, and I come through here real early morning. And just went across the highway to Farmer. But, and then there was 2 young men. One was just a young, probably in his early 20s someplace. He was a car salesman over in Eureka, hobby. And another young boy from Hoopah were bear hunting. No deer and bear. It was during hunt season about this time. They were up over here near Grizzly Camp. And they saw this thing coming across the canyon down, or the cut block that's coming across the block. And he told the younger fellow, he says, shoot it. He thought it was a bear. And then he got told, he said, no, don't do that. It's not a bear. And he had a camera, just got a little Instamatic cameras, and he run in and got the camera and put it on zoom, and he thought that was a telephoto. And he took 2 pictures, and they got that pickup, and they were gone. They were scared of it. But unfortunately, when he hadn't got the pictures, they was too far away. Oh. You could see something there, but you could not tell what it was. Oh. They had a chance, it's the best chance in the world to get a picture of it. But then one was a highway patrolman, a retired highway patrolman up here. He lives up the river here, and he was making firewood up by, back in the hills up towards the Denny way. And a friend of his had some property up there, and he let him go in and make wood up there. And he had to go through a lock gate. He went through the gate, and okay, he had the truck full of wood. He went heading out, and he got down to the gate, and he was just thinking about opening the gate, and he was getting ready to stop, and this thing, something caught his attention, and he just looked over here, and he could see it, but didn't get it. It was moving through the brush, and he could already see it, excepting it from the waist down, right in here, the waist down. And he told me, he said, Al, he says, those thighs were humongous. He said they were like that. And he was patrolling down in Los Angeles, and he said, I've seen everything, but he said, I've never been this scared in all my life. But he won't, National Geographic showered him, he won't talk to anybody anymore. But too bad. An incident happened over here between, most of you here probably know where Hay Fork is, and south of Hay Fork someplace over there, I'm not sure, I think it's on Forest Highway 1, not positive this exactly where it was, out towards Highway 36, anyway, in that stretch in there somewhere. This guy was coming down the road and he was tooling down on his bike, and he hit me. And when he come to his senses, he was running one way, and the Bigfoot was running the other direction. And the bike was not drivable, but he had a handful of red hair. And that's all they know. They don't know anything else. Boy, the waitress at Cinnabars up here, you've seen Cinnabars restaurant up here, this was several years ago. She was going home to Hoopla, she lived in Hoopla, and so she went around the sugar bowl down here, just this end of it, and across the road right in front of her, and she just about hit it, and it went over the hill, and she got home, and her father told me about this. He said she got home, she was shaking, she was scared, and they went back up there and looked, and they couldn't find anything specifically except they could see marks of where it apparently grabbed the trees, it went over the bank on the other side. But they couldn't find any other evidence of it except the I don't think they know about it, she did see it. Oh, we had two young men that probably 20 years ago remodeled our house. We called them Chris and Doug. Well, after they worked for us for a while, and they finally split it up one way, and Chris went into solar energy, and Doug went into logging. And I don't know what it was exactly. I'd ask him, and he would have to look it up and tell me exactly where it was. But he was the foreman on this job there, the hiring job, and they were up on top of the block, and all the trees, of course, you know, they're falling downhill. And he walked out on the top of it while the guys were eating lunch. He was just finished up eating, walked around. And he come back and told me, he said that I run into a great big bear out there. He jumped up and run down through those logs on his hind legs. And then he give the biggest horse laugh you ever hear. And they explained to him, I wasn't aware, bear don't do that. But anyway, it was, and he's very open. I talked to him a couple of times since at least. But it's really unbelievable. By the way, Woody Creek here, just about a mile, 2 mile on Woody Creek here, a not a young man, probably in his maybe 20, 30. He his girlfriend were going up the hill. It was last year, I think, that he told me about this. They were going up the hill there, and this one crossed the highway right there in front of me, just about 2 miles. I looked up the hill. And up that way someplace, and I don't know where it is. I tried to get this guy to tell me where it was, or take me up there. And well, I think I'm an old man. I can't make it, but I could wrong. But anyway, he found a bed or a nest up there. It was a real rugged country. And there's also another one up here towards Hawkins Bar where this man told me one. But there again, I don't know why, unless they just think I'm too old. That's one thing I know. And I was sitting in a meeting one day at the museum down here, and we were discussing some of these things about Bigfoot. And the lady there, they talked about what you're going to do, and she said, don't do that. And so, would you believe the lady next to her told us the story then, what happened? But her son, when he was maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, had been having problems with the hogs. He lived down Hoopla, and he pulled the shade in the room, and he heard this thing out there, and he thought it was the hogs again. He said, oh, the darn hogs. And he pulled the shade up, and here he's looking like Bigfoot face to face. And it scared him to have to death. But then the kids, all these kids, they had some puppies, and they were playing with them. And then the puppies disappeared. And one day they came back. Unfortunately, they were all dead. Apparently what happened, there was a young one, he seen the kids laughing and playing and everything with it, but didn't realize what they had to have. And they died, but they brought them back. But then she told me that she saw that several times that summer down there. And it was off in the Berry Bar or someplace. But I do think I felt for a long time, like I said before, the stigma of being sold the Brooklyn Bridge or something else has kept people from coming forward. And a lot of people just haven't done it for that reason. But today, and just to show you how it's just a small portion of the list I have. I just didn't take time to dig it all out because I can't remember them all. Good. But the man told me today, he saw what he thinks maybe it was. He said, I don't know what to say. He was a EMT on the ambulance, and he was driving code 3 into the hospital. And it mattered really, but he was going down there somewhere between Mad River Bridge and where the turn off to 101 to go north and catch out there James Road. And this would run across the highway in front of him. And he said, Al, he said, you took your little big long stride. He said that thing went across the highway, or their 2 lanes, in 2 steps. He did. But I don't, this man's not lying. I'm quite certain of that. I know him too well. But I really do, thanks to the stigma of being sold a bill of goods, is what's stopping a lot of this coming out. There's a lot more people seeing them. A lot more that I know of that I haven't mentioned here, that some of them didn't say anything about for years. They knew me. I knew them. They didn't tell me. Some fellows back, probably around the time Roger got the film. One's up here at the Brush Knot Lookout, which is right straight up here. The hill is now. Up there, they were up there hunting, deer hunting. And group of them were just standing around talking at that time. And here one crossed in front of them. But he didn't tell me until probably 2 months ago. When he finally told me that this is the case. So anyway, I hope I've added just a little bit to it. And I thank you.
What a treat, and I want to thank Al again for coming down and sharing that with us, and what an amazing person he is, and the clearinghouse of reports here in Willow Creek. Well, getting a little off schedule, but that's because there is no schedule. So we would like to introduce someone to you who's currently authoring a book on the life of Roger Patterson. And I know you all have already had a chance to see some of his displays and also some of the materials he brought on that back table. Before I get too far into that introduction, I would want to remind all of us that we do have some really rare and unique items here today that we'll be auctioning off. And at one point, we're going to decide whether we want to hold a raffle. We have 2 of Roger Patterson's books, I believe the 2nd or 3rd edition that were sent down, 2nd edition, thank you, sent down to us by Patricia Patterson, and they're signed by her and Bob Gimlin. So very, very wonderful items, and the raffle will send the proceeds back to Pat Patterson, but we intend to do that. And there's also the statuettes that David has made of the copies of Roger's Bigfoot statue, and casts, the left and the right from the Patterson Gimlin film, and Eric Altman from the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society has been kind enough to donate a shirt, whatnot. So enjoy yourselves and consider those things. It's really, today is about celebrating, not really about the money, but I hope some of you enjoy these things that are available. It's great that we had such a concerted effort to bring this all together. And so back to David. David Murphy. I'd like to introduce him to speak about the life of Roger Patterson.
Tom, you want to get the lights or no?
Okay.
It's unplugged. Okay. You're going to have to screw up. You lost your audio, David.
Okay. Thank you for being here today. My name is David Murphy, and I just first of all want to thank you for coming here and helping us celebrate this historic occasion, the 40th anniversary of the Patterson-Gimlin film. I just would like to ask first off that you be patient with me because I am certainly not a public speaker. I think maybe for work I've addressed a group of 6 people at Home Depots, so a little bit different crowd here, and I won't be talking on this topic at any Home Depots in the near future. Just a little bit about myself real quick. I was first introduced to the Patterson-Gimlin film and the subject of Bigfoot. I believe roughly in 1973 when I first saw the footage of the PG film on the television, and from that moment on I was just completely fascinated by the topic, and that was my choice of Bigfoot books and the subjects of my interest that I was checking out at the libraries, the school libraries, the public libraries from the time I was a little kid. So I was reading about Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin, Renee DeHinden, Peter Byrne, John Green, all of these people who filled back in those days, and it just kind of stuck with me. For the last approximately 10 years I've been really actually interviewing witnesses, people that have claimed Bigfoot sightings, people that have been involved in the investigation of Bigfoot. And I've had the opportunity roughly in about 2004 to meet Patricia Patterson via telephone, and had corresponded with her for roughly about a year. And was initially my contact with her was to try to coordinate the opportunity to preserve the Bigfoot bust that Roger had sculpted in the early 1960s. And just going from that and arranging to fly up to Yakima, Washington to make a mold of that bust to try to preserve it. I got to talking to her about, I had been interested in writing a Bigfoot book for a couple of years prior to that, but really didn't want to take the typical angle of just writing hundreds and hundreds of reports and crossed the road and ran in front of the car. Same thing, I mean, you can only read so many chapters of that and it just kind of all blends together. So I really wanted to take a different angle, and corresponding in my talks with Patricia Patterson, and then obviously with this Greg Long book that came out that really just vilified Roger Patterson and just made him look like the next thing to Adolf Hitler. You know, it was just the right timing and the right situation and circumstances. So I started talking to her about that, and it pretty much culminated in February of 2005. Flew out there, spent the better part of a week with Patricia Patterson, going through documentation and things of that nature, and just really getting this book project underway. Thought it was something that I was going to have out in a year and a half, and should have known better. Still in the works, and I'm hoping to have it out in 2008. So before we get started on talking about Roger, I just wanted to say real quick, there are the statues back there. We will be auctioning them off. There's 3 of the little Bigfoot busts that Roger sculpted in either 1960 or 61 approximately. These have never been available to the public before, and all of the proceeds for those 3 busts will go directly to Patricia Patterson. So feel free if that's something that you want for your collection to make sure you bid on. I just wanted to ask real quick by raising your hand, how many people are familiar with Greg Long's book that he wrote on the life of Roger Patterson? Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar with it, Greg Long wrote this book, went up and interviewed some people in Yakima, Washington that either knew Roger Patterson or at least knew who he was, and he went in there with an agenda to demonstrate that this film was a hoax, and really the people he interviewed, whether they had anything positive to say about Roger Patterson or not, he basically steered their interviews and what they would say into his format, and basically what it all comes down to is there's a guy by the name of Bob Hieronymus who lives up in Yakima, Washington, who was affiliated with Roger and Bob and a number of other people that used to go riding together. And this guy claims that he was the person that wore a suit. And we'll get into that a little bit later. We're going to go through a slide presentation. I'm going to kind of go over Roger's life just briefly, and then I'm doing just like Dan Perez. I'm jumping all over the place because I'm not an organized person. My wife jokingly says that she thinks I have adult attention deficit disorder, and she's probably right. But never been too organized unless it comes to sports. So anyway, we're going to go through the slide presentation, and I'll kind of go over his life a little bit, some of the Bigfoot investigation, and then maybe we'll just open up to question and answers. You know, Roger Patterson was really an incredible human being. In my estimation, his life would have been worthy of a book, whether he had filmed Bigfoot or not. So anyway, going through the slide presentation, this is Glenn Patterson and Roger Patterson boxing. This is in the early, I think it's roughly around just approximately 1940 or just a little less than that, somewhere right around there. Roger was a tremendous athlete and an acrobat, along with his three brothers. This is his older brother, and this is Roger at around age 7 or 8 doing a one-handed handstand on his brother's outstretched arm. This is Roger and his brothers doing their three-man tower tumbling act. And I don't have the other pictures with me right now, but if you see the sequence, and you'll see all of this in the book, just incredible. They would have a series of these blankets stretched out, weren't much more than a bedspread or some thin covering, and the bottom man on the totem pole would basically fall forward, and they would all just tumble down until Roger maybe was about 7 or 8 feet off of the ground, and he would spring forward, do a complete flip, and land on his feet. So you can obviously see that Roger was not going to have any problem dismounting from a horse to get some footage. So next photo stop. Once again, same thing, different angle. Think this is, I believe, a neighbor of theirs. This is the first time that Roger Patterson attempted this tower, and this is his dad basically panicking with his outstretched arms ready to catch Roger if he's to fall. So go ahead. Thanks. Okay, there's going to be a series of 2 of these photos, and they should be back to back, but I'm going to explain this real quick. And these 3 people, this is when Roger was in the military, roughly 1953. He was in a music and acrobat team that all 3 of these individuals were involved in, and they would tour around Germany and other parts and do entertainment for the troops. And this was part of their duty in the military. So go back. I'm just using this to demonstrate the type of upper body strength that Roger Patterson had. Basically, this technique, in order to do this napkin trick, which is this folded napkin right here, you basically have to, your body's only going to go so far down in this position where you hit these two beams that he's bracing himself on. At this point, once you get to this position, you basically have to turn your wrists backwards in order to lower your body below your shoulder joints. Reach the napkin, and then use only the weight of having your wrists backwards to pull all of your body weight up to get back into the level position, and then twist your arms back around and then extend. So if you can go to the next picture, you can see he's now completed that and picked it back up. Go ahead, next picture. And then once again, this is part of their team. I don't currently know these two individuals' names. I'm trying to actually track them down to see if they're still around. If you notice Roger, his arms, I don't know if you can see it right there, but Roger Patterson, he used to bodybuild with a guy by the name of Billy Pearl, who was, I believe he was Mr. Universe. He was at least Mr. America 2 years in a row, and it was all natural bodybuilding. So Roger was extremely into bodybuilding, and probably doesn't show so much in this photo, but Roger, 5'3", at one point 180 pounds when he was in his bodybuilding days, had 18-inch arms. And for those of you that are into weightlifting, I know Bart, wherever you're at, you can attest 18-inch arms on any size man is pretty substantial. And for somebody 5'3", it's pretty impressive. So go ahead, Scott. Okay, this is where Roger first lived. This is, I believe it's on the corner of, well, it's on Titan Drive in Yakima. I can't remember the cross street. It's right on the corner house. This is when Roger first moved to Yakima. In the, I believe it was somewhere around 1948 or 49, somewhere in that range. I'm sorry, 1938 or 39. And at that point in Yakima, this is obviously all developed and built up right now, but this was, back then, it was just potato farms and fields around this. Go ahead, Scott. This is the remnants of what's remaining of the property that Roger. Okay. The remnant of the property that's as it looks today, it's kind of shackled, kind of looking a little shanty there. But this was the property that they lived in at the time on the upper South Fork Road in Tampico, which is kind of outskirts of Yakima, Washington. And this is the location that they lived at the time of the film. And I have pictures. Go back one. I have pictures of this as it stood back then, so it wasn't a dilapidated property, but 40 years later, this is basically one of the last remaining original buildings out there that Roger had anything to do with. Okay, go to the next picture. This is a Tannum Road. This particular photo right here, this was the house of Jerry Merrick, the late Jerry Merrick, which was a friend of Roger Patterson's. He was really into music, played, had a few albums in a band that he was in that actually had some songs that were internationally known. And this is the place where there was some Bigfoot activity. For those of you that have read Greg Long's book, there is the story where there was some tracks found on this property. There were some sightings. Apparently, one of these creatures looked through the back window at Jerry Merritt's wife at the time, and on multiple occasions there was activity there. Roger had built just to the left of this picture. It's out of view. There used to be a really large tree. Roger built a big giant tower and towed it up into the upper limbs of the tree, and would go up there with his call blasting and basically just inundate the Tannum Ridge and that entire valley with what he believed were Bigfoot screams. And if I don't know what is that documentary there that was it's kind of that docudrama that there was made back in the 70s that was made to look like a real documentary. I think Ron Olson's group put that out. Anyway, the scream that, if you ever get the chance to see that, the scream that is on that is the sound that Roger made, and they borrowed that, I don't know with permission or without, but they used that for the sequence there to imitate what was believed to be a Bigfoot scream. Next picture, Scott. Okay. Kind of hard to see. I think the date on there is something like 1867 or something like that, but it's the old Mondor homestead And the Mondors were Patty Patterson's side of the family. They were some of the original settlers in the Yakima Valley in the Tampico area. And so this was a lot of the property that her grandfather and great-grandfather had in the next picture. This is the last remaining structure on Roger Patterson's property. Recently, Patricia Patterson just sold this property and moved into town. But it was kind of interesting, kind of a somber moment to go on the property and actually go into this shed and see some of Roger's old saddles still sitting there, being waiting to be rebuilt, and just almost in the same position that he had left them. Patricia Patterson was kind enough to let me pull one of Roger's stirrups from his saddle off of the wall there. It was kind of a neat moment for me because as I'm pulling it off, she's saying, "You're the first person to remove that since Roger nailed it up," and it was just kind of a symbolic thing for me, just to kind of reflect back on Roger Patterson and his life and the legacy that he left. Go ahead, next. This structure, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on here, but if you were to picture this wooden plywood as the floor, so that the thing would be tilted up with that laying on the bottom, this contraption Roger Patterson had welded together. And on each corner, I think there was 4 on the back and then the 2 in the front. He had stirrups and straps mounted on there at one point, and he had this thing mounted in the back of an old UPS van. And his plan was not if, but in his mind, when he tranquilized the Sasquatch, this was going to basically be what detained it until he got it to wherever he needed to transport it to. Next, go ahead. Kind of hard to see. Can you see what that says? Prehistoric giant man. Roger took, I mean, this thing is literally this thick. He just basically has all kinds of documentation on some of his research bound in here. This is a wooden cover. He used to have, I guess, leather stretched over it, and then he had the title engraved in that. So that's just one of the kind of documents that I had there. Go ahead, Scott. This is one of Roger's original saddles that he used to use. It's now in the possession of Bob Gimlin, and I guess this is an old military type saddle. And Roger used these a lot because they were lightweight, and so this is very similar to the type of saddle that Roger would have used in during the film. In my book, I will have a photo of the actual saddle that Roger used in Bluff Creek. That's in the possession of his brother, and I was not able to get photos of it the last time I was up there because he was having it professionally redone. So he said once he gets that back, he'll give me some photos. Go ahead, next picture. This is Glenn Patterson, one of Roger's older brothers, actually the second youngest of the brothers, and he still lives in the area. I'm told that he looked almost like Roger's twin, so for the most part, this is probably what Roger Patterson would have looked like, or very similar had he survived. This is Bob Gimlin's truck, still sitting there in Yakima. This is the truck that they took down to Bluff Creek. At one time, according to Bob, the whole sides of this thing, instead of being wood, were actually aluminum siding, and then he had a tarp stretched over the top of it. This little compartment over the roof was basically where they would store the hay for the horses to feed from when they were transporting them. And occasionally when they would sleep in that, they also would take boards and brace them through these rafters on the inside and use that as their kind of makeshift cots for when they were out. This truck, amazingly, the current owner, took me out there and showed me the owner's manual and let me photograph that to show the date that Bob purchased it. I think it has 63,000 original miles from 1965. He hadn't started it in probably a month or two, and he went out there and just fired right up and purred like a kitten. So it was just kind of interesting to see a little piece of Bigfoot history sitting there. Right here, can't really see it there, but the original dent that was placed in the hood of that with Charles Wetzel's backhoe that Bob and and Roger liberated the use of without permission, but and I have some interesting things about that that I'll touch on a little bit later. So I do have a photograph that Bob gave me that actually says there's a banner across the top of this. Right here it says 67 Bigfoot Expedition has basically the face of the Bigfoot that Roger has on the cover of his book on it, and then they're all out there kind of down in the Bluff Creek area in that photo, so it's kind of interesting to see that. Go ahead, Scott. This is Bob Gimlin. I think it's 05 or 06. I was up there 4 times in the last couple of years, and so I kind of lose track of that. But this is his 90% plus wolf dog. And this picture does not do the justice. You have to see this dog in person and see some of the other pictures. I probably should have used a different picture for this. This dog literally stands, I don't know what he's doing there, he's bending down, but he literally stands about this tall on his back. And he's about 5-6 feet long. I've never seen a dog this big in person. I mean, he literally has it in a pen by itself, and he used to go riding up in the Yakima foothills with this dog, but he said it got to the point where he almost had it shot a couple times by other riders thinking that a wolf was about to attack him. So it's like a pussycat, a real friendly dog, but he's been breeding these things for several years, and he has several generations of this dog that, I mean, you see it doesn't look anything like a German Shepherd. You think you're looking at a wild wolf, so that's what it's got. These are the this is a photograph I took of the 2 original casts that Roger cast down in Bluff Creek. On the back side it says something to the effect of Upper Bluff Creek, PG film site, October 20th, 1967, Roger Patterson, Bob Gimlin. So kind of a little bit of historical evidence. It's nice to know that they're still preserved. Go ahead, Scott. This cast right here, this was taken on the Charlie Arion Ranch up in Woodland, Washington. This photo is displayed in Roger's book, Cast Cracked, since that book came out, but it's roughly a 17-inch track. The story with this, I believe it was 1966. This cast was taken, yes, 6/7/1966. The story behind this, up in Woodland, Washington, where the Lewis River runs into the Columbia River, basically there was a husband and wife team fishing along the shores of the Lewis River when they basically reported to the local paper seeing a creature that was well over 9 feet tall walking along the banks. And Charles Edson, who owned a 320-acre cattle ranch right along that shoreline, right at the confluence of the Columbia and the Lewis River, basically started laughing, showing his sons this and saying, this is our shore, our property, it's right here. If this was something that was out here, we would see it. Well, long story short, they took about a half-an-hour walk along the shore bank, and sure enough, found a line of about 200 to 300 yards of these tracks. Roger found out about it, went up there and cast the left and right track, and I have both of those photos right here on this display board. The interesting thing about that, you know, I started looking into Roger's book and going through it and really just kind of, you know, here's a book that's written in 1966, and he's writing about people that have had sightings and activity. And as a researcher myself, going back and looking up, doing some legwork and looking up some of these people's names, I've actually tracked a lot of these people down. They're in their 80s and 90s. Some of them I'm talking to their children. But they're telling me almost verbatim the stories the way Roger wrote it in the book. So for those of you that get the impression that Roger was out there faking things and embellishing things, it's nothing could be further from the truth. Everything that I've been able to track down has pretty much gone right along with what Roger says has happened. Go ahead. This is also the other track for that. Go ahead. This is myself and a guy by the name of Ben Ramirez. One reason I'm going a little bit beyond just Roger Patterson is because I'm trying to refute a lot of the stuff that Greg Lonis has basically alleged in his book. One of the things that really set me off, and just I don't know what it was about this comment that really irritated me, but he said, you know, pretty much Roger became interested in Bigfoot in 1959, and all of a sudden, all this Bigfoot activity started happening around the Yakima Valley. And when Roger died in '72, supposedly it all ended. Well, I've tracked down people from all different times and still have more in the works. I still have other interviews set up. Ben Ramirez, this is Goat Rock's wilderness area. This was 2007, I believe, or actually '06. I took him back to the spot 1 year to the date. He was basically, for those of you that know the area, Goat Rock's wilderness area on the way, I think it's either, it's on the way to Rimrock Lake. It's about 20 miles as a crow flies from where Roger lived in Tampico. All kinds of Bigfoot reports and activity out there. This is an area that Roger investigated quite a bit because there was a lot, like I said, there was a lot of activity and sightings out there. I, by accident, came across this gentleman, and he basically was up there to look at mountain goats because they had advertised this was the time of year to see mountain goats at Goat Rock Wilderness area. So he went up there with his daughter, and it kind of goes into it a little bit over here. You see some photos, that photo there of the trees and the mountain ridge in the back. Long story short, the guy was looking for mountain goats, and he saw what looked like, it's kind of a lava rock formation on this hillside. He thought he was looking at what he thought was an unusual rock formation with these two branches of rock in this shape up on the ledge, and he could see through each of these areas. And as he started looking at it, he gave the binoculars to his daughter, and he said, "Look at that weird rock formation." She looks up at it, and she says, "Well, I don't see what you're talking about, but the mountain goats are going crazy." So he gets the binoculars back, looks at this area, the thing's gone, this rock formation up on this ledge, and he sees this downslope where the goats are, and they're all scattering to the right of his view. And as he pans over, he sees this creature walking down at a rapid pace down this loose gravel ledge after these mountain goats. Well, he didn't know really, he knew about the film, didn't know who Roger Patterson was, but as I started interviewing him, he basically said this thing was 2.5 times the height of these mountain goats out there, and some of these mountain goats stand this high. And he said what really impressed him was the fact that as this thing's walking down a slope about this steep, just how fluid the gait was, and how it was almost as if it was just a human being walking on flat sidewalk. This thing just walked down this gravel path just with ease. And I asked him, "Have you seen the Patterson film?" He's like, "Well, is that the one where the guy is accused of wearing a suit?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the one." He's all, "Yeah, it looked like that, only didn't have breasts. It just looked like he said it was very skinny in the waist. The lower torso the legs were extremely short in comparison to the length of the upper torso and the arms, which really fits a lot of the description." Go ahead, Scott. This is exactly what it was. Fife's Peak Lookout viewpoint in the Wenatchee National Forest, which is on the road to Rimrock Lake. Go ahead. And this is Ben Ramirez and my son, Stephen, looking at the location where he saw it. I've kind of influenced my son to some degree, but he's still somewhat embarrassed about the whole thing when it comes to public. Tells me all the time, "Dad, in public it's BF. It's not Bigfoot." Right. Charlie Arion, the person that I just referred to with the Woodland, Washington cast, this is Charlie Arion's son, Jim Arion. He's now grown, very responsible business owner. His business takes him out into the wilderness. He does forest restoration programs for the state. So he's out in the field all the time, and this is one of his opportunities. He tells me every time he's out there, he finds himself looking for Bigfoot because this is the influence that Roger had on him when he was 11 years old. And by the way, he saw these tracks in the ground prior to Roger ever meeting the family, so he didn't have to have Roger convince him that these things are real. Go ahead. Okay, so we're back. So basically, that's kind of the photo presentation. I really didn't want to get into using Patricia Patterson's photos just because of these photos belong to Roger's brother. These were from his childhood. I didn't really want to get into that too much because of the fact that all of a sudden you're going to start seeing all these photos that pop up all over the internet. So we're going to kind of save those for the book. In the book, what you're going to see, for those of you that are interested, just tons and tons of documentation, documents to refute the claims of Greg Long and Bob Hieronymus. There's just so many things in that book that are just completely erroneous and just blown out of proportion. As I've done my investigation, I've interviewed well over 50 people. I have probably about 200 hours of taped interviews, and many more that I really need to do. But you know, it's just I talk to people that are friends with Bob Hieronymus. They said I can use their interviews as long as I keep their names confidential because they're still friends with Bob Hieronymus. But basically, by and large, the consensus is that Bob Hieronymus is a BSer. He's always been known as a BSer, and they refer to him as Old Honker. Here comes Old Honker. I mean, it's just story after story. He did have an association with Roger. He did know them, so they were together at times. But you know, there's just so many things for him to say that, try to infer to Greg Long that perhaps they went and actually filmed the sequence actually prior to October 20th, and then went back and faked tracks later. Dan Perez presents photos from MK Davis where you're actually seeing a photograph from the film clipping of the tracks that were laid down after they went back and videotaped or filmed afterwards. Things like that. Bud Ryerson, who owned the road construction company there at the time, Charles and Doreen Hooker, or I don't know, maybe Cliff knows, was it Doreen? Doreen. Charles and Doreen Hooker, who were there at the time, had watched on at least 2 occasions Bob and Roger riding up and down Bluff Creek and some of the tributaries around that area in that time frame. Charles Edson, although a lot of people don't give too much credence to him, I know Renee DeHinden didn't think much of him, but he wrote a book. It's kind of a rare book, but he claims that he was there at the time and that he didn't realize it was Roger and Bob at the time because he hadn't heard about the film, but he was doing his own Bigfoot research. He claims, and I can't substantiate this, obviously it's hearsay, but he claims that he saw 2 men in a pack horse going up and down the creek, and he had seen him, and that he kind of ducked out of the way because he didn't want people to start questioning what he was doing out there. And of course, his view is he didn't want to tell these people he was looking for Bigfoot. Who knows whether this is true or not? Renee DeHinden doesn't give a lot of give a lot of credence to his claims, but you know. So anyway, I'm jumping all over. One of the things I thought that was kind of interesting. This is my first trip to Yakima, 2005 February. Bob Gimlin picks me up at the airport, takes me around town, takes me out to lunch. We're in town for maybe an hour and a half, and he's taking me doing sightseeing around the Yakima Valley, and he takes me to drive by Bob Hieronymus's house. And of course, he pulls over so I can get out and snap a picture of Hieronymus's house, and lo and behold, here comes Hieronymus pulling out of the driveway as I'm about to snap the photograph. So he gets out. Can I help you? No, thank you. I snap the photo and leave. Bob Gimlin hadn't talked to Hieronymus since the book came out. Obviously, this was left some tremendous contention between them, and so I go. He takes me over to his house, which is a couple hundred yards down the road. We spent a couple hours there. As we're coming back up, Hieronymus blocks the road, stands out in front of the car, won't let him pass, and Gimlin pulls up next to him, and just classic. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, two or three hours in Yakima, and my wife's going to be getting a phone call from the sheriff's department that your husband's been arrested for getting in an altercation with the so-called man in the suit. He approaches Bob Gimlin on the driver's side of the car, kind of like this. What are you taking pictures of me for? And good old Bob Gimlin, he cracks the door open a little bit, and he's all, "Fat boy, do you really want me stepping out of this truck?" Good old Hieronymus, with his brother backing him up, takes a couple steps back, full of it. Everything he says contradicts the last thing he said. He doesn't know where the film site is. He tells me on his front lawn, I'm talking to him on my next visit, Well, I passed a lie detector test. I said, well, are you aware that according to National Wildlife Magazine, George Harrison article and his editor Dick Kirkpatrick, before they did an article, they made sure that Roger Patterson passed the lie detector test too. Turned as white as a sheet and his mouth dropped open. And just to get to his credibility, this is all hearsay. I have no absolute proof of it, although I have people offering proof. Haven't gotten around to interviewing him. Greg Long puts a great emphasis on people's credibility, on their truthfulness and their character. Well, if their character is flawed, then they're not credible. Well, don't know if it's true. This is just tabloid gossip, but the telltale reaction that Bob Hieronymus gave me reason to believe that perhaps it is true. Bob Hieronymus is married. He has a daughter, grown daughter. Apparently, the accusation is, through the grapevine, that he also has an adult son that his wife doesn't know about. And so I wanted to fill him out for this, and we're standing in his driveway, 3 feet away from his kitchen window, and I can see his wife like kind of eavesdropping. So he's telling me about his daughter, and I said, Bob, hey, where does your son live? And he looked like he was about to pass out and hyperventilate. He kind of looked towards the window, and he's like, I don't have a son. I go, oh, really? I heard that you did have a son. I go, oh, that's unusual. But it was his reaction. Now, I don't know if this is true. Like I said, he may not have a son. I'm going to investigate further. And if I find out that he does have a son, he's going to regret that he ever opened his mouth. Because Greg Long has a double standard. The one thing that I find interesting, and I've interviewed almost everybody that Greg Long has interviewed, and many, many more. And for every person that he finds that says one thing negative about Roger, I can find 5 that say positive things about Roger. One of the interesting things is, that I found interesting, you go through Greg Long's book, if somebody says something positive about Roger, or doesn't say anything negative about Roger, gets in his car, opens up his box of Ho-Hos, and goes to the Taco Bell and buys a half dozen tacos, and opens his Diet Coke. I don't know why he's drinking Diet Coke with all that intake. But, and then he tells his wife, that person's hiding something. I can tell, he's just not being honest. Then when he interviews somebody that says something that agrees with his premise about Roger Patterson, he gets in the car. There's a ring of truth to what that person said. So, I mean, you get this guy that just comes in with a premise. Obviously, Roger has had issues brought up with his character. One of the things that I just wanted to touch on real quick, and I know, I mean, there are things. Roger and Al Diatley apparently did not pay Bob Gimlin money that was owed to him from that film. There are things, and there's tons of people that will come out in the Bigfoot community and say, well, Roger did this and he did that, he was shady, and you know, some of that may be true. I'm sure all of us have things about our lives. I know myself, I have some probably some low times that I'm not really proud of, but I would hope that my whole life's work is not judged by some of my lower points. I'm sure that the best person among us passed away. We could go back and interview people that didn't like that person, and we could paint any type of portrait that we want about that person. So a couple of things I just wanted to say real quick. For those people that say, oh, Roger did this and he did that, you know, I'm going through these documents. I have probably a foot thick of documentation on Roger Patterson, correspondence with Ivan Sanderson, all these scientists. And one of the things that's interesting, I've had a couple letters that people have sent me where they were subscribers to Roger's Abominable Snowman Club. And I hear all these stories about how Roger just would rip open the envelopes and take their money and just throw it away and never respond to them. I've got letters that Roger wrote back to these people saying, sorry, we're not going through with the club anymore, here's your money back, sorry, we'll keep you updated on any future events. Documentation of Roger before his book, writing for permission to quote people. It's a little easier today where you can just send out an email or make a phone call, but back then they didn't have the long distance rates, special rates, so everything was snail mail. So it strikes me as odd for supposedly a person that's as irresponsible as Roger supposedly was to go through the time of writing letter after letter asking permission to quote a person. an additional thing about Roger Patterson, Greg Long says, well, this guy never had a job. How did he survive? How did he make a living? It's true, Roger did more project work than actual jobs. He was kind of more of an artistic personality, so he didn't really like to be tied down with the 9-to-5 job. I have a newspaper clipping that shows Roger Patterson. I don't know if, for those of you that didn't know, Roger was also an inventor. He had several inventions. Some of them are displayed over here. The roll-a-hoop toy, the prop lock that was for the apple orchards up in Yakima, which is the apple capital of the United States. He basically invented this little clip that's like the bread tie, and he mounted this thing on the top of a 2x4, and it's to hold the branches of the apple trees to keep the props from dropping and from the apples touching the ground. I've got a newspaper article with Roger Patterson at the manufacturing plant as these things are coming off, and it says, it talks about the prop lock invention and how in the first month that this was on the market, he had already sold 100,000 units. So
Wow.
That's just one example that I'm sure Greg Long conveniently didn't include on how he was able to generate some money. Obviously, he had a very wealthy brother-in-law, so he was able to have a lot of his projects funded that way. But you know, for these accusations, Roger Patterson supposedly, he supposedly faked this whole film so that he could leave his, as a dying man with Hodgkin's lymphoma, he could supposedly leave his wife and his children set up financially. Just doesn't jive. There was a lot of money made off that film. From all accounts, everybody I talked to, including people that were not family members, people that were associated with Roger, Tom Page, who was funding him to some degree, every single dime went back into the research. I mean, I have photographs of Roger in Thailand 3 months before his death on a wild goose chase looking for the remains of a Bigfoot in a cave. He's spending thousands and thousands of dollars putting it all back into the research, not into leaving some nest egg for his family with hoaxed money. One of the last things I just want to say, a guy by the name of Anderson, can't think of his first name right now, Harvey Anderson, supposedly is claiming in Greg Long's book that Roger came in there in 1961 and he's showing him all these fake casts that he made, and he came in and brought all this fake footage, and he's telling him, well, don't tell anybody, I'm dying of cancer, and my family, I'm leaving this for my family. Well, he swears up and down this was 1961. I have a pathology report. Roger wasn't diagnosed with cancer until 1965. So somehow Roger knew 4 years before he was diagnosed with cancer that he was dying of cancer. And so, I mean, you get after 40 years, you have people that just want their little 5 minutes of fame. Maybe they're sincere, but they're just very mistaken. They're twisting little bits of this story and a little bit of that story and putting it all together. So just basically, I just wanted to say, you know, Roger Patterson maybe didn't do everything 100% above board all the time. I'm sure there's probably, like the Bible says, let he who is out without sin cast the first stone. That's my viewpoint because, like I said, I'm sure if everything that negative that we've ever did was uncovered, Roger would have that appearance to so many people. But I just wanted to thank you for this time. Book should be out in 2008. There's going to be a lot of documentation, hundreds of photos available, many that have never been published before. And the one last thing I will say is you have all of these scientists that were viewing this film and were saying negative things about it. Funny thing is, I have documents from those same individuals that would write Roger and say, thanks for showing me your film. Any other evidence, any other information, let me know. I'm very interested in this thing. But publicly, they had to protect their credentials. So anyways, with that, I thank you for your time. I'm sorry for being so scatterbrained.
You had mentioned the owner of the backhoe with regard to the Patterson-Gimlin film is Charles Wetzel?
Yes.
Whitson.
Wetzel. I've spoken with his widow.
No, you said Wetzel.
Is it Wetzel? Here.
I wrote it down pretty well.
Oh, Charles Whitson. I'm sorry, Whitson. Any other questions real quick? Anybody?
Excuse me.
Bueller?
I heard that he was like a cattleman, like a rodeo wrangler, or
Yeah, Roger rode bareback bronco horses.
But he had
did
a lot
also bull ride.
I heard he had a lot of broken bones and stuff. And
I know he broke his leg at one time, and that kind of sidelined him for a while. But one of the things that was interesting, going back to Roger's physical strength, and you'll see this if you get the book, is you're going to see some photos in there that are just going to blow you away. This is nothing what you've seen up here. Bob Gimlin told me this one time, and I'm not really familiar with horseman terminology, the way you when you grab the reins or whatever it is, and when you're riding. Or bronco riding, or what, I'm not even sure what the terminology would be, but Bob told me at one time the owner of a horse that Roger was riding was so mad at Roger because with his physical strength in his arms, he would at one particular occasion, he grabbed the strap that he would hold on with, and he was twisting it so tight around the horse that it was just like almost strangulating the horse's muscles in its upper body, and it just dropped to its leg or dropped to its knees, and basically the horse wouldn't get up and let Roger ride it. So the owner was pretty upset at Roger for that. But you have to get the book if you want to see. There's going to be some photos in there that you're just going to be blown away with how muscular and how talented a 5'3" man could be and how athletic.
you said he was a bodybuilder. He was pretty physically.
Yeah. I mean, if you can picture somebody 5'3", I mean, obviously you see a lot of these photos as he's getting a little older, he's a little thinner. A lot of these photos where he's involved more heavily in the Bigfoot research, he was already diagnosed with cancer and some of this, but if you can picture somebody 5'3", with 18-inch arms and weighing 180 to 185 pounds.
He sounds like he was a very physically fit person. My question is, when you get cancer, it's kind of like an opportunistic thing. Like if you got broken bones or you've had a health spell or something and that weakens you to a point where you get cancer that's terminal. Was he a smoker?
No. I think there were other members of the family, but back in the grandparents. I know that Roger was given less than a year to live when he was diagnosed in '65, and he lived to 72. So I have photocopies of receipts of literally hundreds of dollars of supplements and vitamins that Roger was buying and taking. And extremely, like I said, he was working out with Billy Pearl. Billy Pearl was on the clean bodybuilding plan and basically did everything. Did not eat meat. Occasionally Roger would eat fish, but he was pretty much getting his protein off of nuts and things like that. Any other quick questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll aggravate. I just wanted to say, when Roger took Benny Allen's big scrapbook, it was huge. It was about so thick and it was just a mess. But it was about so big square. I swore that was in on when you showed on the screen about it.
Oh, that may have been because I know he made a copy for him, and it says on there, it says compiled by Betty Allen and Roger Patterson. So he mixed the reports in there.
Well, anyway, what I wanted to say was, I said, Benny, that's the last time you'll ever go see that. But you know, I don't know how long it was. He sent it back to her, beautifully done, leather, padded leather on the outside of the scrapbook, beautifully done. And Roger sure did a good job there, I tell you. And he was, trust me, I didn't think he would, but he did. But that's because I didn't know Roger that well at that time. But still, Roger had a particular kind of cancer. It was terribly painful at that time. And the reason I know, Francis' grandmother and her uncle both had this particular kind of cancer, Hodgkin's disease.
Yes.
And it comes out in lumps all over, and it was terribly painful. And I figured, well, I've never seen Roger again.
Yeah, and one of the things that people don't realize is if Roger had had Hodgkin's lymphoma today, it's one of the more treatable types of cancers.
Sure.
He probably would have survived it. One of the treatments back then, it was kind of like not far from drilling a hole in your head and letting the evil spirits out. I mean, it was that type of thing. They were giving him cobalt treatments where they were doing burn marks on his lymph glands, on his neck, and just really, it was some really serious stuff.
He was, Roger would go down, he said, Roger told John, he said, he'd always kill him. And he thought he was that bad, he just went dead. Then he came back. And,
well, one other last little tidbit of information I just wanted to, I just remembered that, you know, for those of you that have followed this, I'm sure you remember that the story goes that Roger's first experience with the whole Bigfoot phenomena was in 1959 by an article that Ivan Sanderson had written. One of the things that's interesting is a guy by the name of Bob Campbell told me, you know, we told Roger Patterson about an incident that I had in 1955, seeing one of these creatures at a gravel pit near a dump in Moses Lake, Washington. Him and a guy by the name of Joe Morozzo were there, 22 years old, on a Friday night waiting to pick potatoes to earn extra money. And this thing, they were sleeping in the back of the truck in the camper shell, and this thing walked about 20 feet outside of the truck, and he said they had no idea what it was. They'd never heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch or anything of that nature. And it was right when Roger was coming out of the Army, and they had gotten together, and he told them what they had seen. And so this is like 4 years before he saw that Ivan Sanderson article, and he just shrugged it off. He didn't seem very interested, so he probably just saw a bear or something. And when he read that Ivan Sanderson article, he was talking to Bob Campbell about it at the local tavern, and Bob's like, this is what I told you I saw 4 years ago. And it kind of piqued his interest. Well, he started drawing a sketch of what Bob was describing that he saw. And Joe Morozzo, the other guy that was with him, Bob Campbell at the time, had walked into the tavern, didn't know Roger Patterson, and saw that sketch and almost fainted. Where did you get this? This is what we saw. So it's a little incident where Roger, 4 years before his first time he read about Bigfoot, had some knowledge about it. And what was interesting, sure, it's this guy telling me this, but I go back through this documentation that Roger has, all of these reports, and it says right on there, re-interviewed Bob Campbell and Joe Morozzo about incident at Gravel Pit in Moses Lake, re-interviewed in 1967. So this is, it's something kind of interesting, and anyway, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Right. Well, I think it's time to stand up and take a little break. We're at the point where the schedule has evolved. And, so let's take a 10-minute break. We have a champagne toast planned for the film and for the men who made the film. And I'd like to thank Terry Smith again for bringing that and having that ready for us. Kind of have a favor to ask if everyone would take a break out the front door. I'd like to line us all up for a group photo in front of the hall to show who showed up today 40 years later. How about that? Yeah, right. No, I'm not kidding. Get up there.
Way up in the Northwoods, deep in the dark nights, black in the mountains of the Cascade Range, still tell the tales of an Indian legend. Sasquatch is the legend, Bigfoot is the name. The Indians claim he's the missing link that sits in the gap of the evolution chain. But you can make your mind up when you heard the story. Sasquatch is the story, Bigfoot is the game. You can ride from Canada to Northern California, all up and down the Cascade Range. But if you go alone, I'm here to warn you, look out for the thing with the Bigfoot name. Look out for the thing with the Bigfoot name. mountains, and he heard the legend of Bigfoot for most all his life. You can ride from Canada to Northern California, all up and down the Cascade Range. But if you go alone, I'm here to warn ya, look out for the thing with the Bigfoot name. Look out for the thing with the Bigfoot name. Yeah, you can ride from Canada to Northern California, all up and down the Cascade Range. But if you go alone, I'm here to warn ya, look out for the thing with the Bigfoot name. Look out for the thing with the Bigfoot name.
Thank you. Well, without any further ado, I'd like to bring back Daniel Perez to answer some questions, have a question and answer session. Let's hear it for Daniel. And have had